What if Aiden fought the Baron instead of Crane? Oh boy, before we begin, I want to let it be known this is my opinion, so perhaps you might agree or disagree, but let's quit the chit chat and begin. So this fight will take place on the rooftop, and instead of Aiden leaving to help Lydia and the others, Crane leaves instead. There's so much to talk about, like why would this even happen, and whether Aiden is stronger than Crane, and if Aiden can even control his powers. The setup for this what if will begin before the attack. Instead of Aiden leaving on his own to go save Spike and put a stop to the Baron, he stays. This time they will be more coordinated and will have a better plan to execute. However, I do see most things playing out the same except for when Crane leaves to chase the Baron. Aiden also chooses to leave and search for Spike. This essentially puts him out of harm's way, and when everybody gets captured, Aiden is still free. Crane wakes up and the Baron does his whole monologue thing about letting Kyle escape and whatnot. And then the same thing happens. The Baron kills Spike and Dr. Marin. Olivia is still given the choice to prove her loyalty and she fails. But this time, instead of Lydia saving her, Aiden comes to the rescue. He forces the Baron to retreat but notices that Spike has been killed. Enraged, he pursues the Baron up the rooftop. Olivia is then left to free the others. By the time she does, more soldiers have arrived and Kyle is forced to stay behind to help them out. There you go, this will be the setup for this fight. Now you could make the argument Kyle comes up there, but for this what if I want Aiden to be up there alone. And even if both went up there, this time Aiden tells Kyle to go help the others while he takes out the Baron. Seeing as how Aiden appears to be closer to Spike, having a mentor and student type of relationship, Kyle relents and goes to help the others. Now comes the fun part. Before we can determine whether Aiden could take out the Baron, we must decide whether Aiden is stronger than Crane. This will be a topic for a separate video in the near future, but I think for this video we can agree that both men are relatively equal. This doesn't mean they have the same abilities or even control over their powers, but I can say comfortably that their strength isn't too far apart. However, something I do want to discuss is what the Baron did to Aiden. When we first see Spike and Aiden attempt to save Crane, Aiden still looks about the same as he did in Dying Light 2. The next time we see him, his entire body has become so fucking muscular. Something must have happened to him during the time he was captured by the Baron. It would appear some type of alterations occurred to him either by experimentation or by whatever, but something most definitely did happen. And by the looks of it, it seems like he might have gotten stronger. Now, I could be wrong, and that's a possibility. However, we can't disregard the fact that his body was altered in one way or another. But not shortly after, he gets the snot beaten out of him by Crane while using a baseball bat. Either this was a nerf to him, or Crane is just built differently. But before this, we literally see Aiden take a point-blank blast to the face, and he came out unscathed by it. The game was highly inconsistent with both characters. In one moment, they could depict them having incalculable strength, and the next scene they were being beaten by a random grunt. Also, another thing to point out is the Baron seemed extremely confident that those soldiers could have contained Aiden without using their guns. Whether that was his own hubris or the truth, I guess it can be boiled down to opinions. Now, what am I getting at? Simple. Something happened to him. We just don't know what. So to determine his strength and capabilities, we'll have to look back to Dying Light 2. This version of him, in my opinion, is the strongest version of him. This guy was running the gauntlet with everything and could even be argued that this version of him is stronger than Crane during the Beast. But like I said, that'll be a whole separate video. So Aiden at his peak, for this video at least, we'll say he's equivalent to Crane in terms of physical capabilities. However, Aiden injected himself with dozens of inhibitors which increased his physical abilities. Now added with whatever the Baron did to him, with the assumption he did something to him, we can vaguely estimate Aiden being a bit stronger than Crane, which is going to be very important for this what if. See, even if we want to claim that Aiden is slightly stronger than Crane in quote-unquote their human forms, Aiden is unable to control his powers. Unlike Crane, who learns to unleash the beast, Aiden has never really been able to do so, now more than ever. During Dying Light 2, Aiden was always consumed by his powers, as we saw when he killed Veronica. Even during his fight against Waltz, he barely manages to hold on. And unlike Crane, he can't do all that fancy stuff. When his mind is finally restored by Lydia, we learn he suffers from blackouts. We can assume that when the infection takes hold, his human consciousness is pushed back. He did mention how he was lost and kept trying to find a way back, which I interpreted as him attempting to regain control over his body and mind but failing as the infection was too strong. There's also a chance Aiden learned to control his powers between the time period of Dying Light 2 and the Beast, and perhaps whatever the Baron did to him made him lose control over his powers. But honestly, I can't say. But in both games, Aiden does seem to have a hard time controlling his powers. Right, so we have a vague understanding of Aiden and how strong he is. So for this what if, there will be 3 different scenarios to this fight. For starters, for each of these fights, the Baron has already turned, because there ain't no way Aiden loses to Baron's human form. For the first scenario, Aiden takes on the Baron and only his human form. For the second, Aiden can use his powers, but he can't fully control them. And lastly, let's say Aiden can use his powers as he did when he fought Waltz. But this time, the Baron stays alive long enough for the extra serum he took to take effect. First scenario. So we know the Baron is quite powerful in his transformed state. However, canonically, Crane can beat him in his human form. He doesn't need the powers of the Beast to be able to take him down. And since we had already determined that Aiden could possibly be slightly stronger than Crane, then with this assumption we can safely say Aiden would more than likely beat the Baron in his human state. We also saw Crane throw hands with the transformed Baron and managed to kill him that way. Now, is this kind of downplaying the Baron? In a manner, yes. The Baron is the strongest enemy in the game and possibly in the franchise. However, unlike Aiden and Crane, the Baron is just a normal human. Or I guess more specifically, he has no superhuman feats. When Crane and Aiden use their abilities, it's added to their already extremely powerful bodies. The Baron lacked that oomph factor. It's hard to explain, but essentially the Baron is too weak. And therefore, when he transforms, his chimera powers aren't as strong as they could be. The best way I can put it is that he's the weakness to his own power. Am I wrong? Well, I could be, but based on the fight, the Baron didn't present any superhuman capabilities, and therefore I think his transformation was hindered by his body. So for the first scenario, I dare say Aiden would goon all over the Baron's corpse and scream and release for avenging Spike. Second scenario. I see this fight going either way. I know it's hard putting it into words, but Aiden's beast powers, at least in this game, weren't all that impressive. Now don't get me wrong, he's no slouch and he's very fucking powerful, but he's essentially a volatile on roids. If he can't actively use his powers and loses control, then I can see that being a huge hindrance to him, and potentially it could be detrimental to the fight. The thing is, the Baron is also like a volatile, but with 10 times the roids. And the main difference being, he can control his chimera powers. However, there is a high chance that the difference between their powers is so great that this wouldn't make much of a difference, but it could affect the outcome. The verdict for this scenario is out of 10 fights, Aiden wins 8 times. I could be completely wrong and it's a slam dunk, but if Human Kyle can beat the snot out of Beast State Aiden, and Human Kyle is relative to Transformed Baron, then it's safe to assume the Baron could possibly take out Aiden Beast State. For the third and final scenario, we must revert back to Dying Light to Aiden. He'll retain control over his powers against a Transformed Baron. There's not much that needs to be said. Aiden absolutely dominates the Baron. Like, it's not even close. For perspective, Aiden is strong enough to kill volatiles with a single swipe of his hands. Enough said. However, for this scenario, the extra serum the Baron took when he was losing to Kyle took into effect. Let's just say Aiden didn't kill him in time and he was just enjoying torturing the Baron. Well, to be honest, we don't know how it would affect his body. If we go based on Waltz, then we can assume the serum would just react like boosters. Since we know those things powered up Crane, then it's possibly safe to assume that it would do the same to the Baron. I honestly don't think much would change. When Aiden took on Waltz, Waltz was injecting himself like an addict. Sure, each time he did get stronger, but no matter how many he took, he just couldn't close the gap between him and Aiden. Even if we wanted to say the Baron was somehow now stronger, nothing stops Aiden from going in and injecting himself with the same serum. So yeah, the verdict, if Aiden controls his powers, then no matter what the Baron does, his fate is already sealed. Now, most of the things are my opinions, and many things are left ambiguous, so all we can do is speculate. The Baron, for all we know, is canonically stronger than human Crane, but since there is no canon to how the fight plays out, we can only theorize. Also, I could be entirely wrong and Crane could be stronger than Aiden. Who knows? But for this what if Aiden had taken on the Baron on the rooftop, then the result would probably have been the same. The Baron was always going to lose to either of these two. Or maybe not. Maybe Aiden was just too exhausted from spending so much time in the beast state that without proper time to heal up, the Baron would have been too much to handle. In which case, human Aiden would probably lose, and possibly even his beast state. I guess only the creators could determine who would have won, but for this video, Aiden is the clear winner. You have now reached the end of the video. I appreciate your time. If I missed anything or got anything wrong, or heck, even if you just want to say hi, please let me know. Like, sub, or don't, as long as you enjoy the video. Deuces, Gooners.